They put me by the trash cans. Say that first, and you see the faces change. You'll understand me before I utter another sentence. I sold our land in Jamaica to pay for my daughter's wedding in Atlanta, and she hid me behind the kitchen doors, beside the bins and the clatter. For a long time after, when I closed my eyes, I could still hear the whoosh of those swinging doors, a small, private sound that swallowed me whole. My name is Augusta Blackwood. I am 71. I speak slowly now because I have the leisure of time, not because I have forgotten anything. I was born in Portland Parish, where the hills are green enough to make a city person dizzy, and the sea is a constant hymn. Our cottage sits above Port Antonio, painted the color of a ripe mango, with verandas that catch morning mist like prayer flags. Night-blooming jasmine climbs the pillars and turns the nights perfumed. Hibiscus explode in the sun like paper lanterns. That house, our house, has the memories of 5 generations stitched into its timber. Feet through the veranda, lullabies in the kitchen, my grandmother's voice teaching me which root to boil for a cough and which leaf to tuck under a pillow for a fever dream. We were not wealthy in the way the cities with glass towers measure wealth, but we had what mattered: a roof, a garden heavy with fruit, hands to work the soil, and a faith so steady it could be leaned on. I taught in the village school for 38 years. I love that small building with its peeling paint. There are gifts which cannot be bought with currency. A child's eyes when she learns her first letter. A parent's gratitude when their child passes a test. The slow, honest work of shaping minds. Teaching was my life. Quiet, disciplined, and deep. I liked the order of school days, the way an entire life could be nudged forward by small gestures, encouragement, correction, a bit of patience. Yet even with that quiet, my heart was not entirely here. It was in a city of glass and ambition called Atlanta, where my only child, Amara, had gone to study. From the moment she was small and sharp as a sugar ant, she had the look of someone who would leave. Her appetite for books was insatiable. At night she would lie with a torch hidden beneath blankets, reading stories of distant places. "Mama," she would whisper, "I want to see places like these." In the mornings she counted sums quicker than boys twice her size. She could charm the cockroaches from the pantry if she set her mind. When she received the scholarship offer from Emory, I was proud in a way that almost hurt. Emory, those letters felt like a bridge out of our smallness. Yet the truth about that bridge was this: it had a toll that was higher than most of our pockets. Tuition, living expenses, the quiet cumulative cost of being away. I had been saving, yes, diligently, humbly. I taught, I clipped coins into a tin, I refused treats, I made do. But the numbers are cold when you stare at them, did not add up to the vision I had for her. So I did what mothers do when they have to choose between their own comfort and their child's future. I sold a piece of land. Not just any patch. Our Blackwood land was a place with a name in my mind. It had coconut palms that had been planted by my grandmother. There were old guava trees that produced apples so sweet the children would fight for them. It was the place my father walked after a storm and swore he could hear the sea talk to him. The land had been ours for 5 generations. To think of selling it was to think of cutting a story down the middle. I stood on that plot one hot noon, wind in my hair, and felt the weight of the decision as if it were a boulder on my chest. But when I imagined Amara's small face on the receiving end of an offer letter, when I imagined her sitting in a lecture hall with her hands lifted high, I could not choose myself over her future. So I sold it to a developer from Kingston. He made an offer that made the numbers breathe and the thin sheet of my future lie flat and even. I paid for her schooling, and then I paid the rent, and then I paid for little things: a new pair of shoes when hers split, an application fee that arrived like a small storm. I never told Amara the truth. I told her I had some savings, that I had been lucky. Mothers sometimes make themselves small stories to keep their children's burdens light. She flourished. She was brilliant and fierce and hungry. She graduated with honors, and with each achievement she seemed to be climbing a ladder I had never been permitted to see. She met people in the world of her new life, young professionals who wore suits that smelled of new money, people who ate food plated like sculptures, who spoke of things I had to ask about. Julian Croft was charming in the way of those who have been taught to charm, polite, practiced smiles, teeth that fit the light of a room. He belonged to one of those Atlanta families who move in circles defined by addresses and memberships. Amara told me about him with the same bright-eyed pride she had once used to describe her first set of readers. Years passed. They worked their way into one another. They built a life in that city of glass. They announced an engagement and then a wedding. The word wedding for them was a kind of final punctuation, a place in which you could be introduced to a world that would accept you or not. And their place of choice was the Stanton Grand Manor in Buckhead. I had seen pictures in a magazine, columns like ivory teeth, staircases like the spine of an old novel, chandeliers that hung like frozen constellations. The price alone made my chest tighten. I knew then, with a clarity that felt like frost on a window pane, that the venue would cost a portion of what I had been keeping for my old age. When Amara called and said, "Mama, we've chosen the Stanton," she said it like a person reading from a page of possibility. "Julian's parents are paying for the caterer and flowers, but we still need the venue. It would mean so much if you—" Her voice went soft in a way that made me want to gather her up and tuck her into my chest. "It would mean so much if you could help with the manor." She did not put it as a request. It was a statement that had the soft edge of presumption. So I went to my credit union in Port Antonio, the building with the creaky door and the man who always offered me sweet buns in exchange for conversation, and I signed the papers that felt like the sound of closing a chapter. I wired a sum large enough to rent a palace. I felt many things that day, a quiet, radiant pride that warmed me like sun, fear, a little numbness that comes when you hand over the future you had planned for yourself so another may have more. I told myself I would be there, at the front, a proud mother in blue lace, smiling as she walked down an aisle I had paid for. I pictured the chandeliers and the roses, the cameras catching smiles frozen like diamonds. I imagined my hair in a neat chignon, my hands folded in my lap, my chest full. There were small tensions in the months before the wedding that I smoothed over with the practiced patience of a woman who has learned to make peace with inconvenience. Amara would send mood boards and color palettes by email, and sometimes I would fail to notice a change. "Mama," she would say with that tight note in her voice I had learned to recognize, "this is champagne, gold, and ivory. Please be understated." It was not a request. It was an instruction dressed as tenderness. I told myself it was the natural anxiety of a bride. When she told me the final seating would be tight, because Julian's parents had some last-minute RSVPs, I felt a small prickle of worry, but I brushed it down. I had sacrificed. I had done what mothers do. The things that ran through my head, doubt, indignation, the absurd small voice that wondered if my sacrifice had been not only accepted, but also appreciated, were quieted by my desire to be supportive. To be supportive is sometimes to swallow the small, sharp surprises that life hands you. I packed my suitcase with care. The royal blue dress that Miss Edna in town had sewn for me lay neatly folded, lace gleaming. I pinned a sprig of jasmine to the inside, a private scent of home. My passport, my tickets, Hartsfield-Jackson International, the very name of entry to the world Amara had made for herself. I remember the taxi on the morning I left for the airport, the stoic driver who asked little, the way the heat leaned close like a gossip. The flight between Kingston and Atlanta is a lengthening of lives, a thin corridor where two worlds meet. When I looked down at the blue-green of the ocean shrinking beneath the plane, I felt a tide pull at my chest. The life I had known and the life I had helped create were now separated by a distance that could be crossed in hours, but would feel like an ache for days. Jet lag did not trouble me much. My room in Midtown was polished and efficient, and somehow without soul, the kind where every surface was new and every chair had never been sat in for more than a moment. I spent the morning of the wedding with the calm exactness of ritual. I steamed the dress until every scallop of lace lay like a memory made fresh. I did my hair in a chignon that held my silver with dignity. I watched myself in the mirror and saw the map of my years. There were lines around my eyes, yes, but also the steady set of a woman who had weathered storms. The drive to Buckhead felt like passage through a different country. Streets grew wider. Stores displayed names I had only read about. The Stanton Grand Manor rose like a promise. Columns, manicured lawns, gates that opened with the politeness of a handshake. My heart, which had been steady all morning, swelled to a pitch that brought tears to my eyes. This was the dream my sacrifice had sown. I smiled at myself in the rearview mirror and touched the fabric of my dress as if to reassure myself it was real. At the entrance, a young woman with a clipboard smiled with the practiced neutrality of someone who meets strangers all day and reduces them to details on a list. "Welcome to the Croft-Williams wedding," she said. I gave my name, Augusta Blackwood, mother of the bride. I expected an embrace, a rehearsal of roles. The mother arrives, the mother is seated. Instead, the planner's lips flattened into a professional expression as she consulted her list. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Blackwood, follow me and I'll show you to your seat." There was a little fork in the hallway where the music seemed to come from the other side, and then the planner turned to the longer, quieter corridor. I followed, my heels clicking on marble, my heart like a small bird in my throat. The corridor grew warm. It smelled less of lilies and more of oil, and the disinfectant of industry, smells that do not belong to celebration. The door opened into a space that swallowed sound. An industrial kitchen on one side, stainless steel counters reflecting light like watchful eyes, and then the chair. There was a lonely chair tucked in a narrow alcove beside two gleaming stainless bins, one for trash, one for plates. It was not a seat beneath flowers or a place before candles. It was a place meant for those who, for whatever reason, were not to be seen. "This is your seat," the planner said, as Amara requested. I felt the floor fall away. I did not understand. I thought of all the evenings I had spent sewing a hem in silence, all the nights I had counted coins and dreams until dawn. I thought of the soil of our land that I had sold. I thought of the hands that dug and planted. My mouth made a sound that surprised me. There must be some mistake. I am her mother. The planner's professional expression did not soften. "Enjoy the ceremony," she said, and walked away, leaving the whoosh of the swinging doors to sound like a verdict. I stood there, on the threshold of a small humiliation I could not name, and the orchestra on the other side began to play. The chairs filled, laughter came like wind through an open window. The world, for a moment, arranged itself as I had always imagined it would. My daughter in the light, me at her side. But as the swinging doors kept moving and the clatter of plates and the occasional shout of a waiter reminded me I was in the place where used things end up, I realized that the world had rearranged me as well. I will tell you more. There is the moment of the blow and then the moment after, and in between there beats the whole of a woman's life. But that is for the next part of my telling. Here, in this doorway, I will stop for now. The blue of my dress trembling with the heat, jasmine in my bag smelling like a small blessing, the sound of the string quartet like a distant sea. I had crossed an ocean to be here, and already the current had almost taken me. The morning of my flight, I rose before dawn. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth after a night of rain, the hills cloaked in mist. I walked out onto my veranda, touched the wooden rail polished by years of my hands, and looked toward the sea. The waves crashed steady, like a heartbeat, reminding me of the rhythm of my life. I whispered a prayer, not for myself, but for Amara, that her day would be beautiful, that her future would be bright, that she would never forget the mother who had given everything for her. At Norman Manley Airport, I stood in line with my small suitcase, my passport clutched tightly. My fellow travelers were families going to visit relatives, young professionals in suits, children bouncing with excitement. I sat by the window on the plane, the royal blue dress carefully folded in my carry-on. As the engines roared and Jamaica grew smaller beneath the clouds, I pressed my forehead to the glass. My island disappeared, but the sacrifice I carried with me felt heavier than any luggage. Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was a world apart. Cold, efficient, full of strangers rushing past one another. No one greeted you with warm smiles, no neighborly nods like in Port Antonio. Here, everyone moved with a purpose, as if even their steps were scheduled on calendars. I felt like a small boat dropped in a fast-moving river. Amara had booked me a room in a sleek hotel in Midtown. The tower of glass reflected the sun like a mirror, sharp and unwelcoming. The lobby gleamed with marble floors, polished to perfection, but not a soul smiled at me. In my room on the 12th floor, I looked out at the glittering skyline, the city buzzing below, and felt a loneliness I hadn't expected. It was beautiful, yes, but sterile, lifeless. I missed the scent of hibiscus, the laughter of neighbors, the rhythm of waves. On the morning of the wedding, I took my time dressing. I laid out the royal blue lace gown, smoothing the fabric with my hands. Miss Edna had stitched love into every seam. I pinned my silver hair into a neat chignon, applied a touch of rouge, and placed the small pearl earrings my mother had given me. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not just an old woman, but a mother, proud and ready to see the life she had built for her daughter come full circle. My chest swelled with anticipation. The taxi ride to Buckhead carried me deeper into another world. The streets widened, lined with boutiques and restaurants whose names sounded foreign on my tongue. Expensive cars glided past, their drivers hidden behind tinted windows. Then, like a palace rising from the earth, the Stanton Grand Manor appeared. White columns soared upward, chandeliers glittered through tall windows, and manicured lawns stretched wide and green. My heart swelled. This was what I had paid for. This was the dream. At the grand entrance, a young woman in a black suit stood with a clipboard. Her smile was professional, not warm. "Welcome to the Croft-Williams wedding," she said. "Your name?" "Augusta Blackwood," I answered, my voice trembling with pride. "Mother of the bride." Her eyes flicked down the list. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood. This way, please." She turned briskly and began walking. I followed, expecting to be led into the grand ballroom, where music drifted faintly through the air. My pulse quickened. I imagined guests turning their heads as I entered, whispering, "That's the bride's mother." But instead, the woman guided me down a long hallway, away from the music, away from the light. My heels clicked against the marble, echoing in the silence. The further we walked, the more uneasy I became. At the end of the corridor, she pushed open a pair of swinging doors. A wave of warm, greasy air washed over me. The smell of cooking oil and disinfectant filled my nostrils. I blinked in confusion. On the other side was the industrial kitchen. Stainless steel counters gleamed under fluorescent lights. Waiters hurried past with trays. And in a narrow alcove, beside two towering bins, one for trash, the other for dirty plates, sat a single lonely chair. "This is your seat," she said calmly, as Amara requested. I froze. "There must be a mistake," I whispered. "I am her mother. I belong in the front row." The planner's polite smile never wavered. "I'm just following instructions. Enjoy the ceremony." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the suffocating heat of the kitchen. I stared at the chair, my mind refusing to believe what my eyes saw. My chest tightened, my breath caught. Surely Amara would appear any moment, laughing, telling me it was a misunderstanding. Surely she wouldn't place me here, hidden like refuse, after everything I had done for her. But when the doors swung open again, it was Amara herself. She looked radiant in her gown, her veil shimmering, her makeup flawless. Yet her eyes flashed with irritation when she saw me still standing. "Mama," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "Why are you here? You should be seated already." Tears welled in my eyes. "Why here, Amara? Why by the trash?" She tightened her grip, her voice low and sharp. "Julian's parents had extra guests. There wasn't enough space. It was this or nothing. Please don't make a scene. You understand, don't you?" It was this or nothing. The words sliced through me. I had given her everything, the land, the savings, my very future. And now, in the moment I thought would be my crowning joy, she placed me among garbage bins. My love had been turned into shame, my dignity stripped away with a single cold decision. As the music swelled on the other side of the doors, Amara slipped away, her gown trailing like a river of ivory. I sat down heavily in the chair, the clatter of plates, the whoosh of doors, the smell of grease pressed in around me. Through a narrow crack, I glimpsed chandeliers and roses, a vision of the celebration I had paid for but was not welcome in. For hours I sat, invisible. Waiters passed me, their eyes sliding away as if I were part of the furniture. My royal blue lace, once elegant, now reeked of kitchen exhaust. My hands shook, not from age, but from grief so sharp it hollowed me. I was not a guest. I was not a mother. I was nothing. But then, a small kindness. A young catering worker paused, tray in hand. He looked at me, really looked, and his eyes widened in disbelief. He set down his tray, poured a glass of water, and crouched so our eyes met. "Ma'am," he whispered, his voice trembling with compassion, "I am so sorry. No one should be sitting here." He offered me the glass with both hands, as though presenting it to a queen. In that moment, the dam of my composure cracked. A single tear slid down my cheek. His kindness was a spark in the darkness, a reminder that I was still human, still seen. My grief did not vanish, but something else stirred within me. Anger, resolve. They thought they had buried me here, but they had only planted a seed. Part 3. The kindness of that boy, with his tray and his trembling voice, was a turning point. It was small, yes, but sometimes the smallest gestures crack the thickest walls. His eyes told me the truth I had tried not to see. I had been erased, not by mistake, not by oversight, but by choice. My daughter had measured my worth against the approval of her new world and found me wanting. Grief settled into my bones like a cold rain. But beneath it, something else began to burn. Anger. Righteous, cleansing anger. They thought they had buried me by the trash bins. But they did not know who I was. I am Augusta Blackwood. I had survived hurricanes, hunger, hardship, the loss of land that held my ancestors' breath. I had taught generations of children to rise from nothing. I had built a life of dignity, principle, and faith, and I would not be discarded. The celebration continued without me. I heard muffled vows, polite applause, laughter, and clinking glasses. Every sound was a knife, but with each cut, my resolve hardened. I began to think, to plan, not with the frantic mind of a wronged mother, but with the cool clarity of a strategist. They had used my sacrifice as fuel for their glory. Now I would use their glory as fuel for their fall. That night, back in my sterile hotel room, I sat at the polished desk, the city glittering beyond the glass. The royal blue lace of my dress still smelled faintly of grease, a reminder of my exile. I placed a blank sheet of hotel stationery before me and picked up a pen. Slowly, carefully, I began to write. The words were not of apology or grief. They were the precise language of business, cold and irrefutable. At the top I wrote, invoice. Recipient, Mr. and Mrs. Julian Croft. Item, venue rental fee, Stanton Grand Manor. Amount, the full sum I had wired from my life savings. At the bottom, I added a note. A gift is contingent upon the recipient's gracious acceptance. As I was not treated as a guest but as an outcast, the gift is rescinded. This amount is now considered a debt, payable in full within 30 days. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and addressed it to their home. My hand did not shake, but that was only the beginning. The next morning, at precisely 10 a.m., business hours, not emotional hours, I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the photographer's card I had slipped into my clutch. Marcus Vance Photography. His voice was weary when he answered, the tone of a man who had spent a long night on his feet. Marcus Vance Photography. Good morning, Mr. Vance, I said, my voice calm, steady, carrying the cadence of my Jamaican upbringing. This is Augusta Blackwood, the mother of the bride from the Croft-Williams wedding last night. There was a pause. I could almost hear him trying to place me, to recall if he had seen me among the gilded guests. Of course, Mrs. Blackwood, I hope you enjoyed the evening. I ignored the pleasantry. Your work is impressive, Mr. Vance. So impressive, in fact, that I would like to commission a separate project, entirely independent from your contract with the couple. Another pause, but this one sharper, tinged with curiosity. I see. What kind of project? I want an online preview gallery of the wedding, I said, my tone precise, businesslike, but curated. Select images. The selection will be mine. You will retain your contract with the couple, deliver their final photos exactly as agreed, but for this new commission, I will pay you 5 times your original fee. His breath caught. I could almost hear the calculations turning in his mind. 5 times his fee for a gallery that would take only hours to assemble. A fortune for a freelancer. 5 times? He repeated. Mrs. Blackwood, that's generous. But the rights? I am not asking you to break your contract, I cut in smoothly. You will still deliver their package as promised. This is a separate commission, a teaser gallery, password protected, the contents chosen by me. There was a long silence, then a slow exhale. And what images would you want featured in this gallery? This brings me to the second part of my commission, I said. You will meet me today at Stanton Grand Manor. We will stage a private session. The subject will be me, in the place where I was seated last night. He did not respond immediately, but I knew he had seen me. A photographer's eyes miss nothing. He had seen the solitary woman in the blue lace dress, tucked by the kitchen doors. He might not have understood it then, but he understood now. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said at last, and this time his voice carried respect. "I am available this afternoon." That afternoon, we returned to the scene of my humiliation. The manor was quiet now, its grand halls echoing with the ghosts of the night before. The chandeliers no longer glowed, the roses had begun to wilt. The service corridor smelled of lemon polish and stale grease. The lonely chair was still there, a silent sentinel. "This is the place," I said. Marcus set up his camera with the reverence of a priest preparing an altar. For the next hour, he captured everything. He had me sit in the chair, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. He shot from low angles, making the steel bins loom like monuments. He shot through the crack of the swinging doors, framing me against the blurred glitter of the ballroom beyond. He zoomed close on the lace of my dress against cold metal, the pearls in my ears catching the harsh fluorescent light. He had me look directly into the lens. I did not look sad. I did not look broken. I looked regal, defiant, unbreakable. When he lowered his camera, his face was solemn. "I have what we need," he said quietly. "The gallery will be ready by tomorrow." I nodded. "Send me the link, and send it to the couple as well." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "More sure than I have ever been," I replied. The next morning, the gallery went live. Black and white images, stark and devastating, of a mother placed beside garbage at her own daughter's wedding. Amara and Julian, eager to share their preview with friends and family, blasted the link across their glittering circle. And so the truth spread like wildfire, faster than roses can wilt, faster than lies can be smoothed. By the time Amara called me, her voice ragged with hysteria, the story had already embedded itself in Atlanta society. "Mama, what did you do?" she shrieked, her words breaking on sobs. "It's everywhere. Everyone has seen it. The photos. They're all of you, sitting by the trash. You've ruined us." I held the phone away, listening to her panic. When I answered, my voice was calm, serene. "No, Amara, I did not ruin you. I simply told the truth. You bought a perfect stage, but you wrote me out of it. So I wrote my own story." Her sobs cracked into rage. "You can't do this. You sent us an invoice. You can't be serious." "I am," I said softly, but firmly. "A gift requires gratitude. There was none. Now it is a debt, payable in full." In the background, I heard Julian shouting, his voice full of impotent fury. The call ended with my daughter's sobs ringing in my ear, but my hand was steady as I set the phone down. They had thought they buried me, but I had risen, not as a victim, but as a legend. The storm that followed was unlike anything Amara and Julian had ever imagined. In Buckhead, Atlanta, reputation is currency, and the gallery spread like wildfire through every circle that mattered. Friends forwarded it to friends, accompanied by shocked whispers. "You won't believe what Amara did to her mother." The story was irresistible. A daughter who hid her Jamaican mother behind the trash at the very wedding the mother had paid for. Within days it became legend, retold at brunch tables at the St. Regis, murmured over cocktails at the Cherokee Town and Country Club. Julian's parents, once so proud to introduce their new daughter-in-law, found themselves shunned. Business partners quietly withdrew. Invitations dried up. The Croft name, polished for decades, now carried the stink of cruelty. Amara, once the darling of her ambitious circle, was recast overnight as a villain, selfish, cold, ungrateful. Julian was painted as her cowardly accomplice, too weak to defend the woman who had given his wife everything. Then came the second blow, the invoice. Delivered by registered mail, it landed on their polished marble doorstep like a grenade. The amount was staggering, the full cost of Stanton Grand Manor, legally enforceable and morally undeniable. My letter was simple, professional, devastating. A gift requires gratitude. There was none. The gift is rescinded. Payment due within 30 days. The glamorous life they had built on my sacrifice began to collapse. The debt hung over them like a noose, tightening with each passing day. Their phones buzzed with calls they could not bear to answer. Lawyers blustered, sent threatening letters, but Marcus Vance's contract with me was ironclad. The gallery was his work, commissioned and paid for. There was nothing they could do to erase it. By the time the padded envelope containing their happy wedding photos arrived 6 weeks later, the damage was complete. Who could they show them to? Every smiling image was now poisoned by the truth the world had already seen. Their wedding album had become evidence of a lie. Whispers turned to avoidance. Friends stopped returning calls. Business partners distanced themselves. Julian's family withdrew in shame. Their grand house in Buckhead, once a symbol of triumph, became a prison of debt and recrimination. The arguments grew louder, echoing through empty halls stripped of guests and laughter. The beautiful facade of their marriage crumbled under the weight of disgrace and financial ruin. Eventually, they were forced to sell the house. Soon after, I heard through a cousin in Georgia that Amara and Julian had divorced, their once bright dream reduced to ashes. As for me, I returned to my little cottage in Port Antonio, where the sea breeze still rustled the palms and hummingbirds still visited my hibiscus. Life resumed its gentle rhythm, mornings in the garden, afternoons teaching children their sums, evenings on the veranda watching the sun sink into the Caribbean. Yet within me, something had been reforged. I was no longer simply a mother defined by sacrifice. I was Augusta Blackwood, a woman who had reclaimed her narrative. One afternoon, a package arrived from Atlanta. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a single-framed photograph from Marcus Vance. It was my favorite from our session. Me in my royal blue lace dress, seated beside the steel bins, looking directly into the camera. My expression was not sorrow, nor rage, but calm, regal defiance, strength, dignity. It was a portrait not of humiliation, but of victory. I hung it on the wall opposite my front door. It is the first thing anyone sees when they enter my home. Not a monument to shame, but a declaration. My worth is not determined by others. My dignity is mine, unshakable, eternal. The jasmine still blooms outside my window, the same as when my grandmother tended it. The land remembers us, she used to say. And though I sold part of it to give Amara her chance, I understand now. Dignity, once claimed, can never be sold, never be discarded, never be buried. They thought they had thrown me away, but I am not garbage. I am the seed that grows back stronger. I am Augusta Blackwood, and my story will not be forgotten.